delighted that this tribunal is taking place. For many of us who have been active on World Bank issues for the past 25-30 years, it's a culmination, a major speaking point to bring together from all over the country evidence on the institution, on the way it functions, where it's structurally positioned globally and nationally, its direct and indirect links with the ruling elites in the country, and the social, cultural, economic and political impacts of this institution's role in India. As people before me have said, the World Bank has emerged over the past several decades now as one of the most powerful economic institutions in the world. It has positioned itself, has come to this particular stage through a long historical period, which we should see, as Professor Jamanlal also indicated, as a continuity from the early periods of colonization to the post-colonial period. And it was formed, my presentation essentially is meant to just almost clinically look at the institution itself, because because a lot of us are not aware of what this institution actually is, how it's structured, where its mandate comes from, who is it influenced by, how it functions, and what kinds of internal structures it has, both to exercise internal accountability, but also systems that it has devised to in a more sophisticated way manage dissent. We have the first slide. The bank was formed in 1944 at a conference that took place in Bretton Woods in the United States, in the state of New Hampshire. At that stage, it was called the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and it was formed along with the IMF for a very specific set of purposes. To reconstruct war-torn Europe in the aftermath of the Second World War, to regulate the international monetary and financial order, to restructure international financial and currency relationships, and to provide guarantees to private banks lending money for development projects. What's politically very important for us to understand is that the bank was situating itself, and the debates that took place that led to the creation of the bank in the IMF, that the bank was positioning itself, or was positioned, to also play a role in Western Europe to consolidate US hegemony and to hold back the growing power of the Soviet Union. So in one sense, the bank very early on and the IMF were also mandated to further US geopolitical interests in Western Europe and beyond. That particular element of its history is less understood in India. The other important part of its history is the domination of the US. In the debates that took place in 1944 at the Bretton Woods meeting, where John Maynard Keynes headed the British delegation and Dr. White headed the delegation from the US, it became evident that because at that time the US was the dominant economy, that the dollar would become the key currency of the emerging system. A less known fact at that time was also that the governments of Europe had to give substantial amounts of gold to the US to secure some of the resources for its reconstruction, further bolstering the power of the US. Next please. And therefore it's interesting for us that the US holds the largest number of shares in the bank. One of the major concerns that we have is that this institution that articulates itself and presents itself as a democratic institution integral to the UN system is structurally, and in its governance structure, one of the most undemocratic institutions in the world, undemocratic international institutions in the world. As part of the role that the US played in its setting up, its office was table on the next slide gives us a very clear list of where each of the presidents of the World Bank, and on the right hand side, extreme right hand side column, is their past positions that they held. And if you just quickly scan that, you see that they were very senior officials of banking institutions or of the corporate world or of the military establishment. Three of the presidents of the World Bank, from John Malloy in the late 1940s to Robert McNamara to Paul Wolfowitz, were either assistant secretaries of war, secretaries of defense, or deputy secretaries of defense. A point that I have made in my paper, therefore, is that for a country like ours that has defended a non-aligned spirit of non-alignment in its international and national relationships, it is particularly a matter of concern that we have allowed so much of our economic policy and to some extent our social policy to be defined by an institution that is so dominated by US corporate, financial or military interests. Next slide. The bank has grown, the World Bank Group has grown. It consists of 5 institutions, 5 arms within the, and I'll come to that in a minute. It's the dominant source of financial aid to developing countries. It's currently active in a little less than 100 countries. It provides 81,000 crores of rupees annually for activities ranging from agriculture to trade policy, from health to education, from energy and mining to corporate guarantees and infrastructure development, from increasingly since the latest country assistance strategy, from its role as a knowledge provider to also its role as a gatekeeper, which is that certain kinds of developmental research that is critical of the dominant neoliberal paradigm will be devalued or swamped with the kind of developmental research that the bank supports for various developmental activities in our countries. And the lending from IDA last year was $9.5 million, $9.55 billion. But if you look on the right-hand side, you see the increasing role, and there has been a progressive increase in the role that those arms of the World Bank have played, which are primarily to bolster private sector guarantees, private sector lending, and a range of private sector investments in different parts of our country. And the 5th institution